Hey there, Duke fans, and welcome to episode number 582 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. We are coming to you after Duke toughs it out, squeaks by the Georgia Tech Yellowjackets. 84-79 was the final score. They move to 13-3 on the season, 4-1 in the ACC. We are here to recap everything that happened. First off, I am Donald Wine. I'm your host for this episode. Jason Evans is in Atlanta. He was not at the game, but he is our resident ATLian. Jason, how are you doing this morning?
Yeah, the game was not in Atlanta, Donald, so I did not go. Although deep tease, I will be going in early February to back-to-back games. We have our Saturday, Monday against BC and Wake, I believe it is. And I'll be going to both of those contests. I'll be up in Durham. And we're going to see. We may have something to announce. We may have something interesting to announce about that weekend. We'll see. We'll wait on that for now.
Yeah, I'm hoping to join you for one of those games, and we can, people can see maybe if they can link up with us in person. But before we get started with the recap, just a fair warning from my point. I am here outside Detroit, Michigan. It's Sunday, January 14th. Of course, the Detroit Lions are in the playoffs tonight. I am going to the game. So Jason can see I'm dressed in my Lions Honolulu blue.
You're representing, baby. Yeah,
I'm representing. But the reason why I say this is because I am at a house with my friends from soccer who graciously put me up for the weekend, and their power went out. Yes, on Friday. So we've been out for about 2 days now. It is unfortunate that the power is still out. It's 51 degrees currently inside the house. It is 7 degrees outside the house. So I'd much rather still be inside the house. But I say that to say I wasn't able to watch the full game, Jason. I was able to watch part of it. I caught some of it on the Duke Basketball Network. So that was cool. Shout out David Shoemate for keeping me in line and able to follow the game that way, and also follow the game via highlights and checking the score where I could, because I haven't had power. So with that, Jason, we were talking before the show, and I'm leading this thing because this game was a game of details. There's a lot of things that happened, and even from me following and from friends chiming in via text on what was going on, there was a lot to take in from this game. But we start with the headlines. So Jason, I know you collected some of those headlines. Give me some of the best headlines that we got from the listeners out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, after we do the headlines, before we get to the good and the bad, I want to talk a little bit about what it was for Duke to win this game and what this week was like. It was a very interesting week in college basketball, and I think there's some perspective that matters for Duke. But in terms of the headlines, I start with one of our best headliners, Anthony Sherry, who always provides us with some interesting content. Anthony said his headline, Duke needs to go down under to sting back at Tech. There's a reference there to Tyrese Proctor, who had his best game in quite some time. Certainly best game since he got injured against Georgia Tech. The down under reference there. I like that, Anthony. Jared Strauss, another guy who sends us a lot of good headlines. Duke dodges second sting. I like that. I thought that was very good for Georgia Tech. By the way, Jared noted that despite the fact that Kyle Filipowski scored 30 points in this game, Jared thought he was too much a focus of the offense, and he struggled finishing, sort of his bully ball moves in the post. And Jared, I agree with you. When we get into the good and bad from this game, I'll talk about Kyle Filipowski both in the good and in the bad. Chris Immershine, Duke misses the mark on D, but Young is a smart old man, and Kyle flips out. I loved misses the mark. Duke missed Mark Mitchell. Boy, did Duke miss Mark Mitchell. Lynn Lucas, who, by the way, was a president of the Duke pep band for a couple of years and is now a grad school usher, line monitor in law school. Lynn Lucas gave us 30 for 30. Now, look, I've seen a lot of that. There are a lot of folks. Kyle Filipowski's number. Great. Kyle's number's number 30. Kyle scored 30 points. I've seen a lot of that, but I just want to shout out Lynn, who's not emailed us many times in the past, but anyone who's put a couple of years in on the prep band and is now a line monitor, they get a shout out on the DBR for sure. Van Morris gave us this one, and Paul Downing gave us something very similar. I'll do them back to back. Van Morris's was the Proctor is in. And Paul Downing said, Proctor the doctor stung Duke overcomes injury to defeat Georgia Tech. I thought that was excellent. Duke needed all of Tyrese Proctor because Mark Mitchell was out. Jeremy Roach got hurt. This was a really tough game for Duke to gut out. And Donald, this is what I sort of wanted to mention before we get to the good and the bad. Indulge me for a moment, if you would, sir.
Sure, go ahead.
So let me start with this. Duke struggled on defense in this game. There's no question about that. For the folks who are upset, who are frustrated, who say we should have handled a mediocre Georgia Tech team better than this, especially at home, you're not wrong. But at the same time, do you think that maybe Mark Mitchell would have made a difference in Duke's struggles on defense? I mean, come on. He is almost unquestionably the best defender on this Duke team. He is arguably, I don't know, one of the top 2 or 3 defenders in the entire ACC. And the fact that Duke didn't have him is a lot of why we struggled to figure out how to guard Georgia Tech. There's no question about that. So we're missing Mark Mitchell. We're partially missing Jeremy Roach for portions of this game. Georgia Tech, regardless of what Duke was doing on defense, Georgia Tech was having a ridiculous game on offense. Tech was hit 55% of their 3-pointers. They're just not that. You could leave them wide open and they wouldn't ordinarily hit 55% of their threes. They had an aberrant game. So maybe this wasn't all like Duke sucks. Duke, isn't going to be a Final Four contender. Maybe this was just Duke found a way to win on a day when 2 key players were injured and the opponent was playing out of its mind. And that's a really good thing.
And Jason, it's against the team who, remember, we played them back on December 2nd. And that we've talked about how this team has become a much different basketball team. This Duke team has since we played Georgia Tech last. What happened that last game? You were there. They started out hot. They started out hitting threes. We were missing a guy that was very great on the defensive end. We lost Tyrese Proctor early in the game. This time around, as you mentioned, sprained knee keeps Mark Mitchell out. So there's a lot of similarities, and you have to give Georgia Tech credit on that. It's not necessarily that we sucked or that we didn't play well. Yeah, sure, we didn't play well on defense. We struggled, mightily at certain points of the game. But you have to give Georgia Tech credit because in both contests, they were consistent in having one of their best games of the season. They came out and really came ready to play against us, and it showed. And again, sometimes you just have to chalk it up to, the ball goes through. Some people just all of a sudden they start throwing everything and it goes in, and that's what it felt like this game was. Everything that Georgia Tech threw up into the air, it somehow found its way into the hoop. And sometimes you got to be able to battle that, and I think this Duke team did.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other point I wanted to make, and look, I'm sure if you're even a minor college basketball fan, you've heard about what happened this week in the top 25.
Everybody lost.
Here are the numbers. You ready? Number 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 11, 17, 19, 21, 23, and 25. Those are the teams that lost to unranked opponents. I'm not talking about, Kansas beat Oklahoma this week. That doesn't count. We're talking teams playing unranked opponents. I'll give you the numbers again. Ready? Count with me. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, 9, 11, 17, 19, 21, 23, 25. That's a lot of teams, Donald, playing unranked opponents and failing to win. Duke didn't do that this week. It's a good week. We went 2-0. So many people I'm reading, the sky is falling. Oh, this team's in trouble. No, not at all. And when you get a win against a team playing, that may have been Georgia Tech's best game of the season. 55% from 3. That's one of their best games of the season for sure. And they lost. That's a good thing for Duke. It's not something to be lamented.
And when you think about the grand scheme of what you just mentioned, all the teams that lost to unranked opponents that were ranked in the top 25, it just shows that there are no elite teams this year in college basketball. We've been saying that for a couple weeks now. There's no elite teams in college basketball, and we are one of the good ones. So we need to celebrate the fact that yes, we went undefeated this week. We played a really good game. We toughed out another one. And when everything is falling, we're still probably going to move up in the rankings because so many teams faltered where we didn't. But we leave that aside for a little bit. Let's go to the good. Jason, I want to start with the man in the middle, number 30, Kyle Filipowski. Career high, 30 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and 2 steals. And Jason, the biggest stat that I have, 0 turnovers. That man was the man from start to finish. And we talked about this week, he has had so many bad starts to start the season. This week, he had 2 games where he came out firing from all ends of the court and also was doing it on the defensive end. Kyle Filipowski, I know you're going to talk about him a little bit in the bad, but in the good, there was a lot of good that came with the name Kyle Filipowski.
Donald, I'm not sure. It'd be a chore to go back and look at every box score and figure this out. And I'm guessing, maybe did Zion maybe do? I don't know. It's hard to hard to think of who else might have ever done this. Kyle Filipowski led Duke in every statistical category there is, every positive one. He led the team in points. He led the team in rebounds. He led the team in assists. Now it was tied, but I'm going to count ties here. Led the team in assists.
Ties or
led
wins.
the team in steals. Led the team in offensive rebounds. Led the team in field goal attempts. Led them in free throw attempts. Led them in block shots. You name it, with the exception of personal fouls. He only had two fouls,
which is great because usually he leads the team in personal fouls. We didn't need that either.
He did not lead the team in minutes played. He only played 37 minutes, and Jared McCain played.
Jared McCain was just slightly more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So other than minutes played, Kyle Filipowski led Duke in every category you could. And yes, you're right. There are things I'm going to mention when we get to the bad that need to be addressed. But man, in a game where Duke clearly needed a big presence on the inside because we were missing Mark Mitchell, Kyle Filipowski was there the entire game. And, he had little runs where he was just unstoppable. And by the way, 4 or 5 from 3-point range. And I don't think the 4 shots he hit, I don't think any of them hit rim. They were going through smooth.
So, Jason, I'm glad you brought up the 3-point shooting because I think that is the thing that has come about this week from Kyle Filipowski that's really scary for the rest of college basketball. Here's what I mean. So early on in the game, I think it was like 5 minutes into the game, he was feeling it. He'd already hit I think he was up to 7 points at this point. He received the ball on the wing, and Jared McCain was in the corner, and Flip was right next to him. He just glanced towards McCain, didn't pump fake or anything, just kind of gave him a quick look. And the defender that was between them just went running towards Jared McCain.
It was hysterical. I loved that.
Running, and then Flip just calmly shoots and makes a 3. This is a fantastic use of a subtle head fake to create an open shot. And he did this in the last game as well. It wasn't as pronounced as this one, and it wasn't as effective, but he still was able to get the shot off and make it because he made every 3-point he had last game. But this is about him figuring out that the defender has to choose between the law of averages. The defender that was in the middle between them was like, okay, Kyle Filipowski, who shoots probably 30% from 3, Jared McCain, who is leading the team, he's at 46%. Now, if you're a defender, you rightfully go, oh, I cannot leave the 48% guy open because he's definitely going to make it. But the fact that Flip is now making these is a problem for the rest of college basketball because that is just adding more confidence to the rest of his game because we know he can play bully ball. We know he can drive down and get the layups and get the dunks and get the and ones, grab the rebounds and do the dirty work inside. But if he's starting to make these threes outside, that means that he is unguardable. And if he's unguardable, then that opens up the floor for just about everybody else. Or Kyle Filipowski is going to just continue to get 25 to 30 points a game.
All right, get ready for the number, man. This week, Kyle Filipowski on 3-pointers, 8 for 9.
Yep.
That's ridiculous.
We didn't miss on Tuesday. So
on the season, he's up to 41% on his 3-pointers. In ACC play, he's at 56% on his threes. Those are silly numbers. Those are just silly. He's not going to continue that. Not the 56, maybe the 41%, not the 56%. But man, yeah, he is. Yeah. This just in, player of the week is going to be Kyle Filipowski.
Yep. It won't be close. And that's, but I do want to use that to transition to a guy who I thought did incredible off the bench. That's Ryan Young. 10 points, 9 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 block. This man was all over the place. And when he got into the game, he brought that hockey energy. I went to a hockey game the other night. Ryan brought it on Saturday. And that's what I love about him because, again, he was able to change the dynamic of the game. I think he was also a +9. I think he led the team in plus minus, which again, we don't really look at, but that means when he was on the floor, he was incredible in making sure that we were involved in the lead.
Yeah. By the way, when I was writing my good for this game, the very first thing I wrote was Ryan Young. And Donald, you talked about hockey, and usually you talk about hockey shifts with Ryan Young, because he comes in for those, 2-3 minute long stretches. That was not the case in this game. We were missing Mark Mitchell. We had to have more from Ryan Young than those hockey shifts. And in the second half, he played almost 15 minutes. And he probably didn't come out of the game at all for the final 10 minutes or so of the second half. His second half numbers, 10 points, 5 rebounds. His second half plus minus was plus 12. I mean, in a close competitive game, a game that was decided down the stretch, when he was in the game, Duke was significantly better than when he wasn't in the game. And it was all about his defense. I mean, everyone taught, Ryan Young, you think, oh, YMCA moves, old man moves. This game, it was his defense, because
he did have one dunk that he got banged on, but he responded from that.
Right. Yeah. Kenzie, that dude.
It doesn't matter who his name. It happened.
That was sick, by the way. Wow.
Yeah, that happened, but I think he recovered well from that.
He did. Look, Duke was really struggling with the pick and roll. If you were listening to Randolph Childress, he was like, they're just going to keep running that pick and roll. They're just going to keep that middle pick and roll. And Randolph was right. Tech loves to do that, and that's what Tech did all game long against Duke. And we only had, for the most part, Kyle Filipowski in the middle to sort of disrupt it. And it's a really tough place to put. It was a tough position to put Flip in. Ryan Young, frankly, defended it better than Flip did, and also was better at figuring out ways to provide help when he was in that pick and roll situation. Duke's defense was so much better with Ryan Young on the floor. It's almost, I don't have the stats. I wasn't able to sort of measure the difference in it, but it was night and day. And there's just no question that Duke doesn't win this game without Ryan Young. I mean, yeah, you can say that probably about Flip. You can say that about several other guys, Tyrese Proctor, and we're going to get to Tyrese. But I mean, for a guy who is usually a little used backup big man to play the kind of role he did in this game, on the DBR forums, on the Duke Basketball Report forums, people vote for the man of the match. And the last I checked the vote, Kyle Filipowski was winning the vote. And I said he led Duke in every statistical category. Of course he's winning the vote. But you know who I cast my vote for? I cast my vote for Ryan Young. And I was not alone. There's a healthy percentage of people who went, yeah, that dude was the reason. He's the man of the match, because Duke does not win without Ryan Young. And look, we bag on him sometimes, but when he comes to play, he makes a huge difference for Duke. This is probably the second game this year, at least, where there's no question Duke doesn't win it without Ryan Young just being smart. He's like in his 6th year. Someone pointed out he's like almost as old as Jason Tatum.
It's like a doctor.
Yeah, exactly. But that experience pays huge dividends for this Duke team.
You mentioned at the beginning of the show, we talked about how the details were in this game. The reason why we won this game are the details. That is an important detail, right? The fact that Ryan Young, if you look at the box score, you're like, okay, Ryan Young had a bunch of rebounds, had some points, but it didn't quite paint the story of what he brought to the team in an effort for them to win. Another guy who I think you mentioned him at the top, a lot of people chimed in about Tyrese Proctor and how this was his best game since he returned from injury. Now, we also have to keep in mind the other, X factor about this is that Tyrese Proctor, of course, was hurt the last time we played Georgia Tech. He got hurt in the first minute of the game. So I know this was a game that he circled because he wanted to show, especially in a game that we ended up losing, he wanted to show that he could have been a difference in that game. And he was able to, hit it from outside, but also he was able to provide a lot of offense and really help pace the defense. And of course, when Georgia Tech was hitting buckets, he was one of the guys that I saw that was calming people down, getting everybody back into the flow.
I like that.
You know what I'm saying? Like the leadership aspect things. Of course, he is a captain. So he was able to provide that on-court vocal leadership that was missing in his absence.
Yeah, no, I noted. I saw Tyrese Proctor being a leader out there. And make no mistake, that is a big deal for Duke. I think this is a Duke team. I don't want to say that they struggle with leadership, but I think there aren't a lot of really vocal guys on this team.
We have guys that lead by example.
Yeah.
And that's great. We definitely need that, but we also need the vocal leader, and that's where he comes in.
Yeah, and like, look, the 3 captains, Ryan Young typically isn't in the game a tremendous amount of the time. Jeremy Roach is not a guy who's super vocal, so it's Tyrese Proctor who needs to be the vocal leader for this team. And I agree with you. I saw that again and again from him. He was hunting his shot a bit more than he usually does probing the lane, probing the defense in ways that I love to see from him. It's sort of the first time we've seen him do that since the injury. This is the Tyrese Proctor that we need. This is the Tyrese Proctor we expected him to be. And hand in hand with Tyrese Proctor, we have to talk about Duke's ball handling, because Duke only had 4 turnovers in this game. It was outrageous how good Duke was holding on to the ball in a game where we only hit 43% of our shots, where we only offensive rebounded about 27% of our misses, which is, not a great number,
decent,
not a bad number.
Yeah, it's decent.
It's fine, but it's not great. We had to hold on to the ball to have a chance in this game, because in the end, we ended up taking 63 field goal attempts. This is my old favorite stat, Donald.
Mm-hmm.
I don't talk about it enough these days. For folks who are new to the podcast, Jason loves field goal attempts. Big stat that Jason pays attention to is field goal attempts. Duke had 63 field goal attempts. Georgia Tech only had 55. And that's despite the fact that we shot a ton more free throws than them. Usually like a free throw removes a field goal attempt. So the field goal attempt stat can be skewed by free throws. Duke shot 28 free throws to only 12 for Georgia Tech. So we out free throwed them by 16 attempts, and we outshot them on field goals by 8 attempts. That's the difference in the game. Put simply, Duke had more chances to score.
Well, that's the reason why you love that stat, is because the more field goals you were able to attempt, the more likely that some of them will go in. And if you have more of those than the other team, you're going to win. But also, Jason, I think that free throw stat is actually, more pronounced than you even made it out to be. They went 8 for 12. Georgia Tech went 8 for 12 from the line. 8 is the difference in the number of free throws they attempted and the number that we made. We made 20. So that is a huge, huge difference for the fact that they were able to figure out a way to get to the line. And a lot of it, again, Kyle Filipowski was trying to get to the line, Jeremy Roach trying to get to the line, but they were able to find ways to get Georgia Tech in the foul trouble, but also to get to the line where they knew that if the shot wasn't falling from the outside, the shot wasn't falling from the inside of, they're shooting 40%, they knew they were making their free throws, and they were able to get to the line as many times as they could to really keep them close and eventually pull away.
Hey, I had 2 other things I want to do in the good. They're both kind of quick. The first one is I want to shout out Jaylen Blakes, who had 1 assist, 1 rebound, 1 block shot, 0 points, and 1 bad turnover. He had a bad turnover. He had Duke's only, for a long time, it was the only turnover Duke had. But anyway, 1 assist, 1 rebound, 1 block shot. Why am I shouting out Jaylen Blakes? Because he's a difference maker on defense. Mm-hmm. And for a he didn't play a ton of minutes, only 9 minutes. He was +9 in those 9 minutes. And part of that was Duke just happened to get rolling at the right time, but he was a part of that getting rolling. But the biggest thing was I just saw him, as we often do, you just saw him being disruptive on defense, playing smart on defense, making life difficult for the guy he was guarding. And deep tease, Donald, play of the game. I'm going to be talking about Jaylen Blakes and the play of the game. I think the play of the game was the most important moment in the game, and Jaylen Blakes was a key part of it. So I just wanted to mention him in the good. And then last thing I wanted to do in the good really quickly, a little shout out to Jon Scheyer, because it took adjustments for Duke to figure out how to win this game. And I'm not saying Jon Scheyer is a coaching savant or genius yet. He's on his way. But I like some of the adjustments he made in this game. And he recognized, hey, this Ryan Young dude seems to be making a difference for us. Better leave him in the game. So, we don't often talk a lot about Scheyer, but I thought Duke's execution in this game was, you noticed it get better and better as the game went along. The coaching staff didn't panic. The players didn't panic when Duke got down 10 points to Georgia Tech in the second half. And honestly, I think a lot of Duke fans were panicking. They kept their head on their shoulders. So I'm going to give a little tip of the cap to them as well.
You have to, right? And I know, Jason, we received an email from a listener about, shouting out Jon Scheyer when things are good, because it feels like the only time other people, and I don't think we do this very often, but other people only really go after the coaching staff when things feel bad, right? When they don't like some of the coaching adjustments, stuff like that. So I'm glad you shouted that out, because I think those adjustments really started before the game, right? With the announcement that Mark Mitchell is not going to play. You have to start figuring out how these are going to go from there. I think that meant, early on they went at Kyle Filipowski and said, hey, let's see what he can do once he started cooking. And then there was other guys that, were flowing into what was happening. I think the coaching staff and the players were great at seizing the moment, right? The moment, what was presented to them, they were able to react to it and seize it. And I think even when they got down, there was times where the coaching staff said, hey, we can get back into it. This is what you need to do as a basketball team. You're going to have some of these tough battles. Not every game is going to be a 70-point win. We would love that, but that's just not how college basketball works. You're going to have some struggles. You have to overcome them. I think the team as a whole, led by the coaching staff, was able to do that. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. So let's pause it here. Let's take a quick break. On the other side, we'll get to some of the bad that happened from this game. We'll give out player of the game, play of the game, and player of the week honors. And a member of the Brotherhood is on the move. Just announced a couple minutes ago. Find out who that is after this. All right, Jason, we are back, and we are going to discuss some of the things that didn't go well in this game. And there's a lot. Again, there's a thing of details. I want to start with you with this. It felt like Georgia Tech, every single time we wanted to make a run or at least get some momentum, they would hit a shot. And it felt like they hit everything. A team that is normally hitting 30% from three for the season hit 55% from the game from three, hit almost 55% from the floor. And it just felt like our defense, it felt like was there. They were contesting some shots, but also it felt like at times the defense struggled. And I want to see from you, because again, you got to watch the whole game. What were the details that you saw from there that led Georgia Tech to be able to kind of have the productive output on offense that they did?
I mean, look, the simple answer is that Bey Ndongo was outstanding in the middle and was able to, when they put us in pick and roll with him, they were able to get good shots for him. He took a ton of sort of mid-range, like 6 to 12 to maybe his 14 or 15-foot jumpers, and just hit all of them. And Duke just frankly did not have an answer for that, middle pick and roll. I can't explain it. I'm sure these guys have worked on it. It's one of the most basic plays in basketball. I think that a lot of it was missing Mark Mitchell. I think there's no question about that. And that our rotations on defense were a little skewed because we basically had 4 guys 6'5" and under, several of them 6'3" and under, and 7-footer flip. And usually Duke is bigger than that. I mean, Mark Mitchell's 6'9", and a very quick, knows how to help, kind of 6'9". The reality is, A, Georgia Tech was hot, but more importantly, B, Duke just didn't have the personnel, I think, on the floor to be able to impact them on defense. And, the pity was when I heard Mitchell was out, I was like, oh, maybe this is going to be a game where Tyrese Proctor is able to really get some serious minutes at the 4 and provide a lift for this team. He played, a little more than 2 minutes. And it was pretty clear that he's just not a meaningful part of he's just not a meaningful part of Jon Scheyer's rotation yet. And as a result, I think Duke struggled in the first half because we couldn't figure out what we were going to do with that fourth starter position. You can make a pretty good argument that Mark Mitchell might be the single most irreplaceable starter. I'm not going to say I'm not saying he's the best player in the team, but everyone else, I sort of have a good idea of how Duke functions without them. Look, we would struggle mightily if we didn't have Kyle Filipowski, but I can tell you right immediately, Ryan Young would play that position. We'd still run a lot of the offense through him because Ryan Young is really strong in the post and is a good passer. I can see how Duke would play without Kyle Filipowski. I can see how Duke would play without Jeremy Roach. We had to a little bit last night. I have trouble seeing how Duke plays without Mark Mitchell. And we were forced to do that last night. And I hope, look, we haven't really addressed the injury situation that much. We had several folks email us and say, hey, what do you guys know about the injuries? I'm like, hey, Jon Scheyer hasn't returned my phone calls, In the post-game press conference, Jon Scheyer really didn't address the injuries very much, other than he said, we'll find out in the next couple of days. We heard sort of in the pregame when we heard that Mark Mitchell would be missing, we heard that it wasn't something serious. It wasn't something they expected to take a long time. I think it is really good that Duke is has got the midweek game off this week. It gives Shire and Roach more time. I don't know for a fact, I suspect that what Jeremy Roach had was mostly a cramp. The fact that he tried to go back out there, Duke has really good doctors, really good team doctors. And if there was something structural, if there was something torn, if there was a serious sprain, I don't think they say to Jeremy Roach, yeah, go ahead and get back out there, man.
You good?
Yeah. I think that was a cramp and he thought he could fight his way through it. And then he realized he couldn't and they sat him down. The fact that he went to the locker room, came back out and went back in the game just says to me that can't be something serious. Again, because the Duke medical staff would not allow that to happen. So I've rambled all over the place here on this question you asked me. Didn't you originally ask how did Georgia Tech hit so many shots? Tech was hot. And Duke didn't have the right personnel to be able to contest them because we didn't have Mark Mitchell. It shows you how essential Mark Mitchell is to this team.
Well, we saw that last year in the NCAA tournament against Tennessee. It was the first game that year that Mark Mitchell didn't start, and we struggled on defense. And it's because, as you mentioned, there is no direct replacement for him for what he brings, especially on the defensive end. Yeah, you can bring in some more offense, but the defense, I think his defense is still, in a way, underrated if you think about it. So I really appreciate the fact that the defense was able to rebound and really just get back to its basics without him, and to show that we can get the game under our belt without him on defense, I think is great. So the issue that I saw with our defense is, again, sometimes we can let teams back into the game, and whether it be through shooting or through poor shot selection on the other end. I don't think we had a lot of poor shots that we took, but I do think there's just this tendency to let teams get back into the game very quickly. And yeah, Georgia Tech was hot, but there was that point in the first half where we built up a 10-point lead, and everyone's like, okay, throughout the struggle of the first half, we have a 10-point lead, we're good. And it felt like in a span of about 45 seconds, it was back to a 1-point game.
Yeah,
and it was because it was very quick. And so it's one thing if it's a slow burn and they're like, hey, we're missing a couple shots, they make a couple shots, they're getting back into it. It feels like the runs that we let the other teams have are very quick. And because of that, they are also momentum killers, and it takes a while to really get everybody back into the game. Even at a certain point, I thought Cameron, it felt like on the radio, was super loud in the second half. In the first half, during that run where Georgia Tech was able to close and then briefly take the lead before it tied at halftime, it just made everybody flat. It just made everybody kind of have to, gasp and recollect themselves. So my hope is that in this week off, one, obviously, Jeremy Roach and Mark Mitchell can get healthy, and we can see them back on the floor on Saturday. But also, I want to see a focus on making it where when we do have a lead, make it where we can sustain that lead and use the time to our advantage, right? The one thing, when you have a big lead, the clock is going to be your friend, and making it where they are able to come down and have to use the entire shot clock to take a shot. If you make it, that's fine, but you still have that time element working against you instead of them coming down, being able to take a quick three and making your lead disappear without a lot of time coming off the clock. I think that's the key to keeping momentum, even if you are struggling or if the other team is hot. Anything else in the bad before we move on?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, I've got a few more items that I need to address.
Let's go.
Here.
Let's go with it.
Let me start with the freshman guards, Caleb Foster and Jared McCain. Jared was still active. He was looking for a shot, McCain was, but he just couldn't knock it down in this game. And I thought his shot selection left something to be desired at times. He took too many long jumpers, in my opinion. A lot of them were in the range where it's probably a good shot for him, but he was missing a pretty fair number of those, 12 footers, that kind of stuff that he sort of gets into the lane or near the lane and takes that little pull up. I'm not saying it's a terrible shot. But I think that maybe he can do a little better than that. And look, he went 0 for 3 on 3-pointers. That won't happen very often for him. But there's no question that Jared McCain struggled to score. And Caleb Foster was, frankly, on offense like almost a non-entity. I don't know how you play 28 minutes as the point guard with the ball in your hands, a lot of the time, and only take 3 shots. I mean, Foster had 4 assists, but I don't know. I never really felt him impacting the game on offense, and on defense, he was getting torched again and again and again. He had a just a terrible foul on Miles Kelly taking a 3-pointer with like less than a second left on the shot clock. Um, he Caleb Foster's just God, he's got to be better than he was in this game. And the two of them, I'm going to tie this to another thing I have in the bad, which is that I thought Kyle Filipowski and Jeremy Roach were forcing too much. And those two guys force when there's no one else providing scoring for Duke, when there's no one else providing creativity on offense for Duke. And look, they are a great 1-2 combo. And I expect them to take the majority of the shot, not the majority, but, be the 2 team leaders in field goal attempts virtually every game. I want them to be that. But Duke needs a complementary scorer or 2 to go alongside them, because when Roach and Filipowski feel like they need to take more and more and more of the offensive burden, they already have a huge offensive burden. When they get the sense no one else is doing it, I've got to help. I think that's when Duke gets into trouble. And, I said I was going to mention Kyle Filipowski in the bad. Yeah, he had 30 points, but he took 24 shots. And that's a lot. And there were a lot of them where he was just going in the post, banging into guys and hoping the refs were going to bail him out. Look, I'll admit that the refs never bailed it. Like the referees, ACC referees, there's some hidden secret cabal rule that these guys have against calling fouls that put Kyle Filipowski on the line. It's unbelievable. There's just no one else I've ever seen who fails to get calls the way he does. And to his full credit, Flip doesn't complain. But man, there were a couple times he was literally in a sand. Like there were 2 guys. It was a Kyle Filipowski sandwich between 2 Georgia Tech defenders, and I'm like, how are they calling nothing? But he struggled to finish through contact. There's no question about that for Flip in this game. And then Jeremy Roach as well. I just think that he was forcing a number of times when he was in the game. This team has got to have a third scorer/creator, maybe a third and a fourth. Think about how much better the offense looked, how much better Duke started playing when Tyrese Proctor, about midway through that second half, became a third option. And then actually the reality is it wasn't, because Jeremy Roach went out, so it wasn't a third. He became our second. But this Duke team has got to find, and I get most games it's Jared McCain, is that when Jared McCain struggled in this game, and with no Mark Mitchell, Duke had to find one more option on offense. And I started talking about Caleb Foster. It was not Caleb Foster, and I think that was a problem.
I think to flip it a little bit, no pun intended, to go back to the fact that you mentioned that Jeremy Roach and Kyle Filipowski felt like they had the, kind of increase the burden on themselves to provide points, especially when we were struggling. The thing about it is that's where the leadership portion of things comes in, because it shouldn't have to be that those guys take that burden alone, right? It has to be where they have to empower the rest of their team to say, hey guys, we need everybody to step up. I need you on this play. I need, Jerry McCain, I need your defense on this play. Whatever that is, to get through, and you kind of do it in microbursts. You don't think about the next 4 minutes, which is a staple of Duke, right? We always talk about the 4 minutes between media timeouts, and we talk about winning those 4 minutes. Sometimes it's about winning the next 14 seconds. Sometimes it's about just winning that play. And, I played basketball, and there's times where guys would come up to you and go, hey, man, like, I need you to provide defense on this guy for this play. Can you do it? And the answer, you're like, yes, I got your back, because you know that no matter what happens on the rest of the play, your job is to defend that guy. Your job is to provide that pick, whatever that is that makes the play successful, makes the defense successful, or makes the offense successful. I think that the flip that I'm thinking about is that Kyle Filipowski and Jeremy Roach and Tyrese Proctor, those guys need to coordinate and communicate to the rest of the guys that, hey, I need you on this play. The way that we relieve the burden on those two guys is to make where everyone feels like they are contributing to a play, even if it is Kyle Filipowski or Jeremy Roach that's taking the shot. So that's something that it takes time, right? And I think working guys back into the offense, again, we're missing Mark Mitchell. That provides another layer, even on offense, right? We've talked about his offensive struggles this season, but there's still a portion of, hey, Kyle Filipowski is not going to be the only one down there because Kyle Filipowski can dump it off to a waiting Mark Mitchell who has been waiting there in the wings to dunk the ball or lay it off the glass all season long. And he wasn't there yesterday to do that. So in the absence of him, you turn to somebody else and you go, hey, Tyrese, I need you to make this pick. I don't need you to take the shot. I don't need you to worry about that. I don't need you to worry about the pass. I need you to worry about this pick. Jared McCann, I need you to be in the corner. Caleb Foster, I need you to hit that pick hard. When Tyrese Proctor sets that pick on you, come off of it hard, because when you do, your guy's going to scramble and it's going to leave two guys open. Those little things, and that's where I think the coaching adjustments come through, and I think they did well down the stretch. I think that's where this team can be a little bit better. Those attention details can do that. So I'm very happy that you brought that up, because I think that's something that could easily be worked on. I'm sure that's going to be a point of emphasis on this week off. Okay, we are done with the bad, I think. Let's move to play of the game. And Jason, I know you have a different play of the game than I do, so I'm going to start with my play of the game.
Go for it.
In the second half. And this was a fun play. Kyle Filipowski is guarding in the in-post. He reaches out, steals the entry pass from Georgia Tech, puts his hand in the passing lane, grabs it, dribbles the length of the floor, has two guys collapsing on him on the fast break. He does a Euro step past both of them and finishes the layup with the two guys still trying to figure out how to get in the air with him. I thought that was a terrific play, and also kind of shows the confidence that we have in Kyle Filipowski to run the fast break and finish strong. And again, you mentioned some of his struggles in finishing with contact. There was a lot of contact on that play. There was no foul called because apparently the ACC believes that Kyle Filipowski was not born with a head. So you can't have a flagrant one by hitting him in said head. But he was able to finish through that contact, and I thought that was a really good play.
All right, so my play of the game, I already teased this earlier. Down 7 in the second half. Score is 53-46. Georgia Tech is on top. And Miles Kelly, Georgia Tech's best player, comes in the lane for a short jumper that looks like, look, man, he hit that stuff all game long. And Jaylen Blakes came just out of nowhere to block it. I mean, like, it was just it's one of those plays that Jaylen Blakes makes that, frankly, there's no other player, there's no other guard on Duke who can make that play. It's just, yeah, period. We're all done if it's not Jaylen Blakes. Kyle Filipowski grabbed it, sent it ahead to Jeremy Roach, who made the layup and was fouled. It turned into a 3-point play. Cameron went crazy. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could almost feel my TV shaking. It was so loud. And that was a huge, huge moment in the comeback. I have that as my play of the game, but I could also go about a minute and a half or so later in the game when Kenzie Reeves was dribbling the ball, and suddenly Jeremy Roach was dribbling it instead. I don't know how it happened. It was like he's dribbling the ball, and suddenly Roach reached out, and Roach started dribbling it instead. I went, what?
Now you see it, now you don't.
Right. Roach went down. He missed the layup, but man, I've talked about him a lot. I can't talk about him too much, though. Ryan Young was the guy who had hustled down there to get the rebound and put up the rebound basket. And it gave Duke our first lead in a long time. You know, Tech was up 10, like just a couple of minutes before that. And suddenly we came back and we had the lead. I want to point out that when the play started, Ryan Young was well behind the play. I mean, how is our center? Probably the slowest guy on the floor. Look, I don't know. Maybe he could get in a foot race perhaps with Flip. Would be interesting to see. But I have a feeling that Ryan Young is probably the slowest regular on this team. And I don't know how Ryan Young managed to be the guy to get down there and get that rebound, but man, he did. There was no other Duke player. When Jeremy Roach missed the layup, there was no one else who had a shot at it other than Ryan Young. And both those plays, there were several really, really great plays in that Duke comeback in the second half. But those are my two favorites.
It is a scientific fact that hustle can add 40 miles an hour to your running speed. Science agrees with me. Don't check it. Please don't check it. Okay, we're gonna go to the player of the week, Jason. In 3, 2, 1. Who is it?
Kyle Filipowski.
Okay, good. Just so we're on the same page there. I don't think we need to go into anything further about that. Now, before we close out, Jason, I want to mention to the folks out there that, if you're following the Dukies in the NBA, obviously We Are the Brotherhood is all over your TV almost every single day. There's some Blue Devil that is playing in the NBA on TV, and there was a trade like 5 minutes before Jason and I jumped on to record. Marvin Bagley III was traded along with Isaiah Livers and 2 second-round picks, the 2025 and 2026 picks, from the Detroit Pistons to the Washington Wizards for Danilo Gallinari and Mike Muscala. Now, Marvin Bagley III is joining Tyus Jones in DC, and funny enough, those two teams play each other in DC tomorrow. So they're still going to DC. There's going to be in a different locker room than they were before. Jason, really quickly, thoughts on, I know you haven't really watched too much of the Pistons because, as I can tell you, there's not a lot to watch with them, but your thoughts on Marvin Bagley joining Tyus Jones in DC?
Well, so I think it gives him an opportunity that he sort of didn't otherwise have, because he frankly was not playing very much in Detroit. Detroit has a lot of pretty young big men that they are rotating through. And look, Pistons are not good.
They're not good.
They're really bad. It's a problem if you're a Marvin Bagley and you're not getting time on a team that's really bad. But it's sort of the reality of of what their rotations were like there and who they're trying to develop. He'll get more of a chance on Washington. I think it's entirely possible he'll probably be sort of the backup center to Daniel Gafford. I don't know that he's going to play much power forward, but Bagley, frankly, hasn't been playing much power forward in the NBA. He's mostly been playing as a center, sort of as a small-ish kind of center. And I think he'll have more opportunities on Washington. I certainly think that a change of scenery is good for him. Bagley has never developed into the player that I think a lot of folks thought he could become. He's good on offense in the NBA. He's frankly a minus defender. He's just not a good defender. I mean, and that was the book on him when he was at Duke as well. But he's going to get more playing time, I think, in Washington. And I hope he can figure some things out. And I think playing with a point guard like Tyus is really, really good at finding his teammates when they're in good spots. And that could help him out as well.
Yeah. And unfortunately for Marvin Bagley, he's moving from a team that is the worst team in the NBA to a team that is the most unserious team in the NBA, and the Washington Wizards. A lot. If you've seen some
Jordan Poole much,
Jordan Poole,
oh my God.
Kyle Kuzma, like there's a lot going on in DC. They also only have 7 wins. So for him, this is about, again, getting that playing time and really trying to focus in on some of the things that will keep him on the floor. You mentioned his offense has been very good. Even with the Pistons, he was, coming off the bench, in several games and having double-digit points, maybe a few rebounds and a couple of blocks. But he needs to be the guy that provides energy to a team that has otherwise been playing very much unseriously in the NBA so far this season, with Tyus Jones accepted, because Tyus Jones has been kind of the leader trying to get this team into serious mode at times, but it just hasn't been working out so far. Maybe adding another Brotherhood member to the mix will help Tyus Jones kind of get everybody together and as he can lead. But make no mistake, he's moving from a very difficult situation to another one in Washington, and hopefully he's able to thrive at least in this particular new setting.
Yeah. By the way, it's worth noting, I mean, Marvin Bagley has averaged double-figure scoring every single season of his career. But look, the biggest thing with him is just get healthy, man.
Yeah.
His rookie year, he played 62 games. Since then, he's never played 50 games in the season. Part of it is sometimes there have been some teams that haven't had him, sort of like the Pistons did, haven't had him sort of as a heavy minute guy in their rotation, so he doesn't necessarily play in every game. But man, I mean, he has the degree to which he has struggled with injuries, the degree to which he can just not get on the floor for extended periods of time. It's been a problem for a guy who has just unbelievable talent. It's a pity that he hasn't been able to get healthy enough to be able to show that talent at the next level.
And consistency, because in the NBA, even more so than college, if you have 15 points one night and 8 points the next, you're not playing. Like it's very, he has to kind of have more of a head of, hey, I need to get in and get my numbers, because if I don't, then they're going to put me on the bench and some other guy goes out for 25. There goes your minutes. And that's just kind of how the NBA goes this flavor week. But I wish him the best of luck. I know for Wizards fans, Duke DC, we actually have a meet and greet next week. So hopefully we can see Major Marvin Bagley join Tyus Jones at that. I will be at that as well. And we'll leave it there on episode 582 of the Duke Basketball Roundup. Thank you, as always, for everyone who tuned in to listen. Again, you can reach us online at Duke Roundup. You can also email us your wonderful headlines as you did for this game, DBR Podcast at gmail.com. We will be back later this week to preview the Pitt game, another chance to see Pitt in the next 2 weeks. But we'll preview that game later this week. But until then, he is Jason Evans. I am Donald Wine. And now it is time for the Duke Band to play us out and take us home.